Should a country have the right to decide and determine its own future, even if I don't personally agree with the decisions that it takes? That's what we discussed on the Jeremy Vine Show today.
I don't support Scottish independence, but in the same way I don't want everyone to have a divorce. But I support the right to divorce and I support the right to national self-determination. Look, the majority, if you believe in parliamentary democracy, there is a Scottish Parliament. And in the last elections, there were parties which stood on the basis of, if you vote for us, then we will have an independence referendum. A majority of members of the Scottish Parliament were elected under that banner. Therefore, there's an obvious basic democratic mandate. People go, well, back in 2014, there was a referendum. That was supposed to be once in a generation. Yeah, but the problem with that is the promises made to the Scottish people included, if you want to preserve your membership of the European Union, then you need to vote no. And that was one of the main planks of the Better Together campaign.
It's true.
Now, the Scottish people voted to remain in the European Union, but they got booted out. And I'm sorry to say, but actually this case is just going to strengthen the case for independence, because a lot of the Scottish people are going to look at the fact that they are being denied by a court in London their right to determine their own future.
Just to say, Sturgeon said something else. She was asked by reporters whether she's been forced to play a weak hand.
If it was perfect, it would be my first preference. The fact that it's not shows that it's not perfect. But I tell you something, it's better than just deciding Scottish democracy isn't worth anything and that people don't have a say. So we will work through the hand that has been dealt to us. We will work with that because we have no other choice.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, there we are.
Look, this is about democracy. I don't think there is a good economic case for independence, actually. I really don't.
Well, there is no
case.
Well,
yeah, but that's not the point, you see. I think people have the right to make decisions about their own future that I don't happen to agree with. I might look at a couple who are friends of mine and think, well, actually, I think they're very well suited together.
Isn't the issue here, what you're describing is the difference between Scotland deciding on its own to have a vote and go independent, or Scotland having to ask Westminster for permission to have a vote. So don't you get into a situation where any part of the UK can secede from the UK if it votes for it?
Well, I believe that there are in terms of four nations, if you like, I believe in Irish reunification, but there's the north of Ireland, you have Wales, you have Scotland, and you have England. I think they are clearly coherent nations with their own identity, and I think that the Scottish people have the right to decide their own future.
Cornwall? What about Cornwall?
They voted... Well, it's not a nation. I'm sorry, it's not...
Well, they think a lot of people down there think they are.
Do you know what?
No,
just quickly, there is a pro-independence movement in Cornwall, which is completely marginal. I'm afraid to say, whether you like it or not, if the majority of the Cornish people wanted their own country, that is their own decision.
But that's fair enough. If you say, and I'm not making a comparison between Cornwall and Scotland.
It's not the same because it's not. We have four nations. It's called the Four Nations.
As an example, it's about whether one part of the UK can make its own decision, or whether it has to defer to Westminster. And actually, people might say, it's very unfair you've got a judge in London deciding this.
Oh, it's not just a judge. That's where the Supreme Court of the unified country sits. That's why it was in London. There's no other reason for that. But Nicola Sturgeon came up with an economic plan. If she were to get independence for Scotland, which I downright hope never happens because she should never be in charge of anything, in my view. However, the part of the fiscal plan was relying on a finite resource with the North Oil, relying on the fact that she was going to stay with sterling for a while, but create this central Scottish bank. Then with the Scottish pound, let me tell you...
But can I just say, you know what, like you, I wouldn't vote for the Scottish National Party, but you just said that you wouldn't have her in charge of anything. But the point is, the Scottish people have voted...
No, the members of the Scottish National Party voted for her. And in order for her to get in, she had to get in bed, metaphorically, with the Greens.
Hold on.
That's why she's there, Owen, that's why she's there.
Let me answer.
OK, go on.
I didn't ask a question.
I know I was trying to speak, but I just got interjected.
No, go
the Green Party in Scotland are a pro-independence party. They support another referendum. A majority of the Scottish people voted for that. They're clearly, I'm afraid to say, the Scottish people have provided over and over again a majority for Nicola Sturgeon government. That's just a fact.
All right.
They've also... Of them didn't vote for Nicola Sturgeon, the way the constituencies are... The majority didn't.
Hold on.
I hear what you're saying. And you've used the same argument against the Conservatives, by the way, saying that they don't... But
they did. I
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I said that.
You have.
You have.
I don't like our electoral system, but it's the electoral system we have.
Right.
The Conservative government is the legitimate government of the country, whether I like it or not, because the people voted in a parliamentary democracy
So you used
to
the
give
key
them a
term there.
majority.
So look, if I had a choice, I'd support a federal Britain. Obviously, it would be a republic. I know that's probably a bit far-fetched given where public attitudes currently are at. But I'd have devolved power to the nations and to the regions, and we'd have a looser arrangement than what remains actually a very centralised country compared to a lot of other countries. But I do understand why support for independence has drastically increased. I mean, if you look at the polling over the last few years, there's been a steep increase in independence, and that's partly obviously to do with the Tories being in power. It's to do with the injustices of the economic model that the Tories themselves exist to promote. Scotland hasn't voted for the Conservatives since 1955, so you can see where they get pretty teed off, ending up with a government, an obnoxious right-wing government they suffer the consequences of, but they haven't, or most of them haven't voted for. It's also to do with New Labour, to be honest. I mean, the rot set in under New Labour. That's when the SNP first had their big electoral breakthrough in the Scottish Parliament in 2007. And that's because, while New Labour did do some good things like the minimum wage, devolution for a start, they didn't get rid of the economic model that Thatcherism created and the massive discontent that it fueled. So for me, it's about understanding why you get so many people in Scotland who think to themselves, I'm fed up, I had enough of this, and I want out. A lot of them feel over the last few years like they're in a pub handcuffed to an exceptionally drunk scamp who's wet himself, ranting and trying to start a fight with everyone. And they're like, could I be unhandcuffed? I get all that. I don't personally think that the case for independence is there, I think economically and all the rest of it, but I don't even want to get into that because for me it's about the democratic case that the people of Scotland voted for a majority in the Scottish Parliament who said, if you vote for us, we're going to support a referendum on independence. That's a democratic mandate. I can't, if I was in Scotland, like my mum lives in Edinburgh, she votes for the Scottish Labour Party, I'd vote for them. And if a majority of Scottish Labour MPs were sent to the Scottish Parliament, there wouldn't be an independence referendum. But guess what? They haven't won the election for a very long time in the Scottish parliamentary elections. So the views of people like myself, or more importantly like my mum, I'm afraid don't have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. I think, whether we like it or not, this is going to happen. You either make it painful and drawn out and make Scottish people obviously even more angry about the situation, or you just get on with it and accept the fact that democracy is sometimes something which is painful, not pleasant, often when you're on the losing side, which I have been quite a lot. And that's why I believe it is the right of the Scottish people, given the circumstances have changed, the promises they were given in 2014 are now null and void, specifically on Brexit. Given that there's a mandate in the Scottish Parliament, the case is overwhelming. Let the Scottish people decide. Give them that democratic right. Anything else is an affront to democracy. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you next time.